Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today on buying in Portugal, where we're going to find out everything you need to know around what's involved with buying and living in Portugal. I can't wait to find out more about this fantastic country, and I'm really excited to actually be visiting in a month's time and actually get some sun out. So can't wait for that. But before we get into the questions, so many of you have already submitted questions in advance, which we're very grateful for. We'll get through as many of those as we possibly can. But please be aware we've also got the live chat as well. So please feel free throughout the webinar to jump on and ask any specific questions, and we will do everything we can to get through as many as possible. And we will share the recording with you as well. But I'm Nikki Stevenson, your host for this webinar today, MD at Fine & Country, and also joined by these lovely people. So let's go around the room and find out who we've got, who they are and what they love about living in Portugal as well. So Charles, I'll come to you first, if that's okay, for a little intro of who you are and the brand you represent and what you love about living in Portugal.
Thank you, Nikki. My name is Charles Roberts. You can tell I'm British, from Yorkshire originally. I'm a joint partner and managing director of Fine & Country Portugal. I have lived here for 40 years. So to answer Nikki's question of what it is that I like about Portugal, I should think that 40 years answers it in itself. And I don't know how many of you in the audience are sitting with outside temperatures of 28 degrees and thinking about jumping into your swimming pool and then a nice glass of Portuguese red wine afterwards, but that's what I'm thinking about.
Love it. Thank you very much, Charles. And Matthew, over to you.
Good evening, Nikki. Thanks for inviting me on the webinar. I'm Matthew Chrisman. I'm a partner of Levin Strengths. I've been living in Portugal for the past 21 years. I live in Lisbon and have the office down by the sea in Cascais. In terms of Levin Strengths, we've been here for 49 years. And in terms of what I love, so many things about living in Portugal, but if I have to say one, I'd actually say the people. They're so patient, lovely people. I brought up a daughter here, bringing up children here. Just the patient nature of people. They speak fantastic English, and they're very, very welcome foreigners, much more so than some of their neighbours, definitely.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Matthew. And over to you, Jeffrey.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Great to be here. My name is Jeffrey Graham. I'm a senior partner at the law firm Edge International Lawyers. I'm a dual national, British and Irish. I'm also an English solicitor and Portuguese lawyer. And we are a law firm, full service law firm, which covers the entire country. I've been here now for 25 years and counting, I have to say. And I suppose the thing I love about the country is, safety and security. It's really extremely relaxed, pretty chilled out environment. And I think that a lot of what is attracted me to Portugal remains the same. You feel safe. So it's just great to be here and great to continue to live here.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Judith, over to you.
Hi, good evening, Nikki and everybody. My name is Judith Price. I'm a mortgage broker in Portugal. I first came over to Portugal 23 years ago with Barclays Bank and set up their non-resident mortgage program. Things I love about Portugal are really the food and drink, to be honest. There's very few places in the world where you can get a decent bottle of wine rather cheaply in comparison to, say, something like a bottle of Coca-Cola, which I don't think is so good for you. I've lived mainly in the Cascais, Lisbon area, but also done some time in the Algarve and also the interior of Portugal I know quite well, and the north. So it really is north to south an amazing country and gives everybody a wonderful lifestyle.
Brilliant. Thank you, Judith. And last but not least, over to you, Jonathan.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for attending. Yes, my name's Jonathan Watson. I'm currency specialist here at Lumon. We specialise in international transfers for clients moving money for international property transfers. So all aspects of the property transaction, but also ongoing living costs. So one of the key things I love about Portugal, I'm actually doing this from London today. I think it was about 6 degrees this morning, and it was sunny, but it was very cold. So, of course, the lovely warm weather over in Portugal. We've actually got offices in Vila Moura. Try and get out there when I can, and just the lifestyle, really. You know, the slightly more relaxed approach to life. Certainly, me being a Londoner, you know, it's lovely to embrace that. So, I've been at Lumon for 14 of our 25 years of trading. I've helped literally thousands of clients over the years moving money in and out of Portugal and all over the world. Last year, we traded about £7 billion worth of currency for clients moving money for international property transactions. So one of the things you like to do at this stage in the webinar, just to find out a little bit more about you, our audience. So you should see a poll coming through shortly now, all in relation to timescales, as in when you might potentially be looking at some offers. As you'll be aware, buying an overseas property doesn't happen overnight. There's a number of different considerations to be made there to do with the actual purchase, and even once an offer is accepted, it can then be a few weeks, maybe months before that will develop. And certainly Lumon have a number of different options that we can offer you there in terms of financing arrangements and different aspects of contracts that we can share with you that help you to manage and budget accordingly so you don't suddenly get caught out. So thank you very much everyone who has responded to that poll, and we're just going to find out a little bit more about you again with one more poll in terms of where you're joining us from in the world. We could obviously look after clients wherever they're joining us from. Perhaps the UK, the US. I can see all of the boxes being ticked here, wider Europe, you know, all over the world, and that's great. Yes, Lumon certainly can facilitate transactions from all over the world, lots of different currencies, US dollars, Canadian dollars, of course, pounds into euros as well. And we will talk a little more later about some of the important things going on in the currency market. Again, that will affect your budgeting and planning when you are looking to buy an overseas property. So thank you very much, everyone, for responding to those polls. And back to you, Nikki.
Excellent, thank you very much. So let's get into some of the questions then. So Charles, the first question I think from me is, you know, we've got lots of people on this call that have made the decision to buy in Portugal. Where's a good place to start?
Where's a good place to start in terms of what? The process?
The property search and the process. From your perspective, is there a good place that people should start when they've made their decision to buy?
Well, yes, I think that the very first thing that anybody who is going to go ahead with a purchase anywhere in Portugal is they will need a lawyer to handle the conveyance. They will need to open a bank account here, which also the lawyer can help them with. They will need a Portuguese tax number, which also the lawyer can help them with. They may need to discuss how they're going to bring the money into the country in terms of their personal financial situation. Even if they were buying a property through us as an estate agent, it would not be common for me to be privy to the personal financial circumstances of the client. But I think that a client can open up in that respect to lawyer or to a wealth tax expert. And if they're looking at raising some mortgage finance with the property here to be the security for the loan, then they would be well advised to use somebody like Judith, who is an independent mortgage broker, and they will obviously going to have to open their books to Judith for her to be able to assess what is the correct thing to do. Also, I mean, you know, to cover everybody, they're going to be transferring quite large amounts of money from wherever their base is. It could be the UK, it could be Sydney, Australia, whatever. And there are savings to be had by using professional currency specialists. There's no point in just using the local bank, which most people unfortunately do, but there are serious savings. So I think before you come and see, as it were, somebody like me or my company or the equivalent, you need to set the ball rolling. I'd say the lawyer is the first step, yeah, because then you know what's coming down the track, yeah, and there won't be any odd surprises, yeah. And then once you've actually made that decision, and then you need to come over here and go through the process of looking, and that can be a process that takes 2 weeks, 2 years, or more. It depends on your individual circumstances. But I think you'll always find that there are professionals who will assist you in your journey. And I would like to think, I can certainly speak for myself and my company, and I think I can speak for everybody else on this panel because I know them personally. They do not just perform their function and then leave you high and dry. We're here for the long haul. You will eventually sell that property. I want to sell it. Jeffrey wants to conveyance it. Matthew wants to do something with the profit that you make on it. Judith is interested in another mortgage. If you're taking the money back home, then Jonathan's interested in doing the exchange. So everybody has an interest in keeping touch with you, and you've got friends, and the friends are the best form of marketing that we can have.
Excellent advice, thank you very much. And when it comes to buying, I mean, what are the additional costs associated with buying a property in Portugal that we need to be aware of?
Well, okay, I'll try and answer that very quickly so that we'll move on with things. You will have to pay the lawyer. There is nothing for free in this world. And that will very much depend on what it is you're buying. I don't want to go into lawyers' fees now because it depends. On the property itself, you will pay a property purchase tax at the moment that you do the final transfer of title of the property into your name. That is based on a sliding scale. The lower the price, the lower that tax is, but the highest it can be is 6.5% or around 6.5% of the purchase price. You will pay stamp duty and you will pay notary fees as well, which would come to about 1.2% of the price. And you've got a small cost for registering the whole transaction in the land registry. If you're buying without a mortgage, that's the total sum of the costs of purchasing. If you're buying with a mortgage, correct me if I'm wrong, Judith, there will be an additional notary fee related to the actual mortgage on completion. Yes? Or
yeah.
No? Yeah.
0.6% of the mortgage amount you pay to the government additionally, plus all the associated mortgage costs.
So we would normally be telling a buyer of somebody who's buying something of above 500,000, yeah, then they should budget, excluding lawyers, yeah, for somewhere near 8% extra taxes and costs, exclusive of lawyers and exclusive of a mortgage cost.
Okay, very helpful, thank you. And typically, are the asking prices in Portugal negotiable?
Yes. Short answer. So,
okay,
yes,
yeah, no,
I think
good.
you would not very negotiable, but have a go. Yeah.
Yeah. Good, thank you. And when it comes to buying, do you typically get any guarantees on the construction of the property?
Yes, on a new construct. Yes, there are all sorts of guarantees on construction here. If the and they're quite good because in effect it is the engineer that signs off the building who will go to prison if there is anything wrong with the construction of the property. And Jeffrey would probably be able to answer this better, but there are at least 10-year guarantee or 5 and 10-year guarantees on various things. But it's pretty well covered in that respect, and construction standards in Portugal are very high, yeah? and not particularly well understood by the British market, because here we have to construct to earthquake standards. So everything is built of steel and concrete. It has to be able to resonate. If there were to be an earthquake, we can't build brick on brick on brick. It would just collapse with a tremor. So our construction is actually more expensive and better than what you'd normally find in Northern Europe.
Right, that's interesting.
Right, Charles. The guarantee is for 5 years. Builder's guarantee, that's also for a, if you like, a renovation. The building guarantee also applies.
Brilliant. And in your experience, Charles, is the buying process quite straightforward? Is it complicated? Are there particular risks that buyers should be aware of to consider before going ahead with a purchase?
Well, there is no reason for it to be complicated. Some people make it complicated, but it doesn't need to be. You need to understand that legally in this country we're dealing with the Napoleonic Code, which is the same legal system as in all of Latin Europe, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal. If you go intercontinental, the same as you would get in Brazil or any part of South America, and funnily enough, Louisiana in the United States, which is different from our law in terms of how it works. So you will find here that there's a notary involved in many stages of this process, and the notary has a duty of care, or a duty to check that everything is in order. So it's absolutely impossible for you to buy a property here that has, the guy still has an outstanding mortgage that hasn't been paid off. That just can't happen. Yeah? So you have your Geoffrey Graham of this world who does the conveyance and the due diligence on your behalf. You have a notary that also does due diligence on all of the documentation associated with the sale. If you're buying something that's under construction, there are checks and balances that you can put in there to protect yourself during the construction. I won't go into the details. It does not need to be complicated, and it should not be complicated. And the thing, I think the best advice I can give is that if you're buying something abroad, and it's the first time you've done it, and you have made your money out of something that is non-associated with building properties, let the experts do the heavy lifting on the actual process of conveyancing the property, etc. Leave it to them. They won't do anything without your written consent. And you don't. The last thing that this should be is a hassle. Right? It should be a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Charles. And Matthew, I'll come to you next, please. And I think let's start with a bit on NHR, which is coming to an end. If you're happy to just give us an overview of what that means for Portugal, and if it is still a tax efficient place to come for pensions and investments.
Sure. So NHR has been around since 2009. And the Portuguese government, from the 31st of December last year, basically have stopped it. A few people can get in this year, but really NHR was offering low tax on pensions and overseas investment income for Portugal. However, the good news for those people now looking to move to Portugal, Portugal still, with the right tax planning and the right financial planning, you can still draw down from pensions and investments in a highly tax efficient manner, and in many ways actually lower than the 10% on pensions previously with NHR. But the key there is planning, because Portugal have got their own versions of ISAs. So the UK ISAs being the capital gains tax shelters on investments. If you move to Portugal, become a tax resident in Portugal, you can draw down from these Portuguese type ISAs. They're very much EU ISAs. They're insurance based products. Where basically it's a first in, first out ruling, meaning that one, you can basically withdraw your initial capital tax free. Once you've taken your initial capital, then the growth part is taxed at very, very low rates. And it's the same thing with pensions. With the right structuring, you can still draw down on very low rates, lower than many of the neighbours here in Western Europe. And also a few other areas. Portugal has no wealth tax, has no inheritance tax as well. So in terms of my world, which is financial planning, for people looking to come here and retire and live off pensions and investments and pass assets through generations, it's highly efficient.
Brilliant, thank you. And what about when it comes to buying in Portugal? If somebody's buying a property there to rent out, how does it work in that scenario with tax on the rental income?
Yeah, the rental income is generally taxed at 28%. You can add it to your income tax scale rates, but it's normally lower for just a flat 28%. So it's not highly tax efficient to rent out, but still it's yeah, it's still good income from that. But it's a general 28% tax. Okay.
And one of the questions I believe that we've had is, how important is it to make a will when you arrive in Portugal?
Well, it's more of Jeffrey's area than mine, but yes, it is. If you have Portuguese assets, you own assets in Portugal, you should have a will, without a doubt. I mean, do you want to expand on that, Jeffrey, in terms of why you should have a will?
100%. I think the advantage of having a will here is that you have control over who inherits your assets in Portugal. And we very much recommend that clients have a separate will to govern their assets in Portugal itself. The beauty of certain nationalities, I suppose, is that it's possible to select that nationality as a nationality which will govern the distribution of your assets, and therefore you will not, in certain circumstances, be subject to the rules of Portuguese forced heirship. So, yeah, definitely advisable to make a will, because the will means control.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Back to you just quickly, Charles, for a moment. We've had a question come in from Christopher to ask if at the moment, in your opinion, there is a property bubble in Portugal, as in his opinion, at the moment, it seems that properties particularly come across as wildly overvalued.
Well, that's the market dictates, yeah? And as long as there is demand, those are the market prices. The place where I'm living in Cascais has undergone a revolution in the last 10 years. I would say that prices have probably risen, I don't know, 200 and something % over a 10-year period. But the fact is, it's a small place, and more people want to live in it than there are houses to be had. So it is totally market driven, and there are, you know, you can't compare areas of Portugal that do not have any of the pressure of foreigners purchasing to those areas that do. It would be a truism to say that the foreign purchaser helps to drive up prices in those areas, but he doesn't drive up prices in non-touristic areas. They're two totally different things. Of course, if there comes, and these things are cyclical, if there comes a huge oversupply of product, then the market will again dictate there's too much on the market and prices will come down. But you look at real estate anywhere in the world over the last 50 years, and you have ups, you have downs, but you look at the graph and it's always up. It's never actually down long term. The curve is always up.
Thank you very much. Judith, over to you if that's okay. Question here, can I get a mortgage in Portugal if I'm not a resident already? And what is the process?
Yep, well, certainly you can. The banks are very happy to work with international non-resident clients and have been for a number of years. As I say, I came over here 23 years ago and set up with Barclays their non-resident product. So it is something that the banks have been doing for a number of years. With regards to the process, what I say to people is it's not particularly difficult, it's just sometimes a bit different to what you might be used to from your home country. And I think really where those differences come in is around documentation. So when we go to our home country and we apply for mortgages there, or even for loans, your home country already has a lot of sort of what we call financial footprint and information stored about you for them to be able to make the decision, or more should we say the computer make the decision on your lending. So when you're applying for a mortgage here in Portugal, they will ask for credit reference from your home country. So they'll ask you to go yourself to somewhere like Experian or Equifax and log on online and download your own report and provide that to the bank. So what I would say with regards to a process is, if you think you want to buy, and think you need lending, then don't think of getting that just as you're going to make an offer for the property. Put all your ducks in a row, sort of contact either somebody like myself or a bank and understand what is available. Speak to somebody, provide paperwork so they can verify exactly what your affordability may be, if you can actually get what you're thinking you can get. Sort of get what you call an answer in principle, although it's not exactly the same as most other countries. An idea of what you can borrow, and then also an idea of what documentation is needed. And then once you're ready to make an offer, already have all the information at hand to move forward as quickly as possible, because I'm sure, as Charles will tell you, as soon as you want to make an offer, then all hell breaks loose and everybody wants to know when you want to complete. So if you've already prepared, then it makes Charles's life a lot easier.
And are there kind of typical minimum and maximum amounts when it comes to borrowing, or are there typical loan to value percentages that you work to?
So minimum maximum amount is really made on an affordability basis. Minimums are really 50,000, maximums up to the millions. I mean, again, if you can afford that. With regards to loan to values, this is dictated a little bit about where you're resident. So lower loan to values if you're outside of the EU. Interestingly, since the UK went out of the EU, the banks haven't really altered their approach with regards to lending terms. So they still classify the UK as part of the EU from a lending perspective, which is great. And then also how they divide up loan to values could be if you're employed versus self-employed. So slightly less on affordability and loan to value with self-employed clients.
Brilliant, thank you. And what are the kind of typical rates that you're seeing at the moment?
Well, the good news is finally we saw a high point in about December last year. The Euribor this year has been coming down, so just to give people an update on that. So the base rate they use in Portugal is either the 6 or the 12-month Euribor. The 6-month Euribor is about 3.896 at the moment. It was just over 4% at the end of last year. So each month they reevaluate that, and then the banks put what's called a spread or a margin on top of that when you're looking at a variable rate, and that can be anything from about sort of 0.6 up to 2%, depending on how they class you with a risk factor. The more interesting rates at the moment, so you're looking at sort of nearly 5% for variable. With regards to fixed rates, slightly longer fixed rates are more attractive at the moment. So a 5-year fixed around 2.9%, 2-year fixed about 3.25. So they are attractive rates, and especially I think compared to perhaps the US market, South African markets and the UK.
Great, thank you very much. Jeffrey, over to you. for everybody on the call looking to relocate to Portugal, I mean, what residency visas are available to us?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. I mean, there's a whole variety of residency visas available. I see there was a question raised also about the golden visa and whether the golden visa is still available. Yes, it is. The beauty of the golden visa being that the minimum stays of 14 days in any 2-year period. The golden visa, however, has changed in the sense that now it's based upon a investment in a collective investment fund of up to 500,000 or more, together with options at 250,000, and therefore it's no longer real estate driven. However, the D visas provide a whole range of possibilities for entrepreneurs and individuals in receipt of passive income. Entrepreneurs can opt for the D2 visa by setting up a company, paying themselves a minimum salary, and D7 visa for passive income recipients can also, it's a simple case of showing that you have sufficient income to support yourself as far as Portugal is concerned, which I think in global terms, and certainly the clients which I think we all see, are pretty easy to fulfill. And, you know, I think the D visas, in terms of, they're probably a little bit faster than the golden visa right now. So you're probably looking at perhaps a 9 to 12 month process, depending upon your origin country, because the process starts in the country in which you're currently resident. The golden visa is going to be 12 months plus, so over a year. But again, we're in control of the process here. It starts in Portugal, and effectively we can drive it from here once the investment has been made. I suppose the great news, really, which is hot off the press, is the fact that now, in order to obtain a Portuguese nationality, the 5-year clock will start to tick from the moment that the submission of the application of the respective visa has been made. So for all of those people who are perhaps a little bit frustrated that it might be taking a little bit longer with a view to obtaining their visa or indeed their renewal, the great news is that all that time is counting towards the time at which you can actually apply for your nationality. So that's, Nikki, it's quite hard to cover. I know we're limited time here. So as I say, there's a whole menu of visas available, but those are just touching on some of the most popular ones that we see from our clients.
Thank you. And one of the questions is, if you do buy a property in Portugal, do you then become immediately a tax resident in Portugal?
Fortunately not, simply because, not that it's terrible becoming a Portuguese tax resident, as Matthew has already indicated. It's really about, as you know, as Charles mentioned at the beginning of the process, a non-resident Portuguese tax number is obtained, and if you want to remain non-resident, then you remain non-resident. Notwithstanding the fact that you've bought a property, it won't affect your tax residency status.
Thank you. And a question from Grant coming in. You mentioned a small proportion of people are still eligible for the 10-year NHR scheme. What's needed to still be eligible for that?
Okay, I don't know, Matthew,
that might be one for Matthew.
Is that one for you, or do you want me to?
No, it's one, this one for you, Jeffrey. Yeah, because you're dealing with his applications, not me. So, yeah.
Okay, no, fine. I just wanted to steal your thunder, Matthew.
No, you're a gentleman.
Yeah, look, it's still available. You know, there are transitional provisions which are in place for individuals, for example, who have a residency process already in motion, or indeed have a valid residency card. Similarly, if they've signed a rental contract, sometimes even a reservation agreement, promissory contract by the 10th of October of last year. So there are a number of transitional provisions which still allow application for an NHR in 2024, or indeed up to the 31st of March 2025. For those individuals who are interested in exploring that, certainly happy to help. We're still getting quite a few queries from individuals who do qualify, actually. But one of the things I should say about NHR, and one of the things that I have said to clients at the beginning or the end of last year, was just because it's ending doesn't mean it's right for you. So really, you have to look at what is, what are the requirements of the program? Fine, but what are the benefits of the program in terms of, is your income exempt? Is your income benefiting from a special rate of tax, be that 10%, as Matthew has said, on pension, 20% on qualifying salary and consulting income, exemption on dividends, royalties, interest. It's about us and any professional taking analysis or undertaking analysis of the individual to see if it's right. It's not always right, but I think both Matthew and I have found that generally speaking, it's quite right for people. But as I say, it's a little bit of investigation is required first.
Excellent, thank you. And Jonathan, over to you. Lumon, obviously, you guys are currency exchange experts. Could you just tell us a bit about why an individual moving their money should speak to you guys instead of their local bank?
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. Good sort of kick-off question to begin with, and we'd sort of touched on this a little bit already in terms of exchange rates. That's one of the main reasons to work with a currency broker. We can actually save you money over the banks. We can demonstrate savings. Typical savings does vary. It depends which bank you're with, what type of account. Sometimes where you are in the world, in my experience many years, some banks in particular countries can be a little worse than others, but bottom line is, as a broker, much like a mortgage broker and other types of brokers, by going out to multiple sources which we purchase currency from, it gives us a bit more leverage to be able to almost manipulate the rate a little and undercut some of the typical rates being offered by banks. So that's the sort of headline reason. And if you read bits and pieces online in newspapers and magazines about buying overseas property, it normally does make a recommendation there because of the exchange rate factor with a currency broker. But it is more than that. It really is about the service aspect, some of the information that we can give you about what's going on in the markets, and also some of the options. So Charles mentioned there about looking at bank accounts. So that's a common question we get quite early on. Do I need to open a bank account locally, and what's the sort of process there? Well, in fact, if you're dealing with Lumon, you don't need to open a bank account immediately. You may not be able to initially too easily for various reasons. And once you've registered, that is the first step in the process, you get immediate access to a Euro wallet. It's basically a Euro client account for clients of Lumon. And you can then use that to buy euros and actually make your payments in a very similar manner to having an actual bank account, but it is a much easier process, and I'll explain why. Let's just say you did have a local bank account in Portugal, you got 100,000 euros in there, and you then need to get that transferred potentially to a lawyer. There may be some extra steps you'd have to go through, and certainly if any of the panel want to step in and correct me here, please do feel free. But there can be some extra steps to go through. It's a bit like banking almost anywhere in the world. Typically a large amount of money, you might have to book an appointment, certain days of the week they may be open, etc. So there's a few steps to go through. If you've got 100,000 in the Lumon wallet and it needs moving to the solicitor, it's a very simple process. Just send us an email. There's a few security checks we'll go through, and then the money gets transferred and it's there same day within 24 hours. So particularly if you're still going to be in the UK, the US, or wherever you're living when that property is going to complete, which can be the case, that's going to be a much simpler process for you. This wallet also allows you to purchase currency when you want to. We talked earlier about the timescales involved in an overseas property transaction. That can give you quite a narrow window within which to actually make your payments if you're using the bank, because you may not actually have your own Euro bank account. As I say, you'd be forced to buy the currency when the lawyer is asking for the money. And as I say, there'd be a deposit, then maybe 2-3 months later, the balance is due. So like I say, you'd have that very narrow time within which to buy your currency. With Lumon, you've got this wallet, and if it's a particularly good day, or if you're concerned that the market may move against you, we can actually lock in at those favorable moments or just a time that suits you, and then hold the euros here and then pay them out as required. So it's very much, yes, it's about the exchange rate in terms of competitive rates, but it's actually about the timing of when you're purchasing a currency and also the planning of those payments. last thing you want is having to give an embarrassing phone call to Charles or anyone else, over there, that there's been some sort of problem with the finance side of things with a overseas property transaction. So we can help to really contain that budget, to really understand those costs, and just make sure it all goes through smoothly. So yes, a lot more of a service-based approach that versus what you can get with some of the banks out there.
Brilliant, thank you, really useful. Thanks, Jonathan. So just a quick question in general. I mean, I don't know who's best to answer this, but is everything that we're talking about in terms of advice applicable to purchasing in Madeira as well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Question here around back to tax when it comes to rental properties. So one for you, I think, Matthew. Is it possible to buy a rental property under a company or a different structure to be more efficient than the 28% tax rate?
Back in the day in Portugal, people bought a lot of properties, especially in the Algarve, through offshore companies. But through the years, Portugal has some anti-avoidance laws that have come in. That generally buying property through companies, single properties anyway, through companies isn't so tax efficient. If you're looking to buy a portfolio of properties, then a company can work quite well, because then you're saving on certain taxes in terms of capital gains and those sort of things. But generally, if it's just for your own use, companies aren't used so much anymore. But I know back in the day, in the Algarve, Charles, very much it was the vogue, wasn't it, to have them in offshore companies back in the day?
It was, and then Portugal brought in some pretty draconian disincentives to stay with offshore companies. I mean, maybe Jeffrey would be better in answering this. If we're talking about an extremely high value asset, there may be reasons why you would still consider a company based outside Portugal, Delaware or Malta or wherever. But in terms of buying an apartment or a villa that you intend to rent out when you're not in residence, I don't think that you will have any real savings from putting it into a Portuguese company or a foreign company. All you'll have is the expenses of maintaining that company on top of the taxes that you will no doubt have to pay.
Okay, thank you very much. And a question for you again, Charles. What's the best period to buy, February to June or September to December?
I suppose I would, I don't know, to answer that, I think November through to the end of February, when the weather's worst and the amount of potential buyers are all tucked up in bed in Sheffield or Birmingham or wherever, and they're not here. So maybe your offers would be more attractive during those few months than they would be in May and June, when we've got the world and his wife here. But it's not. I mean, I know they say in the UK that things are seasonal, in that once spring has appeared, and people have forgotten about the winter, etc. I suppose there's a little bit of that here, but if you want to come with a cheeky offer, then I would suggest it probably should be December, January, February.
Great, thank you very much. Question for you, Judith, from Jeannie. Can you get a mortgage for building a house after you've bought a plot of land with your own money and you have another house in Portugal?
Yeah, absolutely. The banks are open to lending for construction. So as she says, if you've already bought the land, that's fine. There's no finance for just land. But then you would have to submit to the bank all the paperwork associated with that construction. And they would analyse that together with your affordability and all your personal documents. And the construction phase is around 2 years. So they will lend over a period of 2 years and release in stage payments to you. But always go and make a inspection and evaluation of what has been constructed already before they'll release the next amount of money.
Thank you. A question from Cami and John. Is it more beneficial to buy a new property or a resale in terms of investment potential and cost?
I think really it's personal preference. I mean, a new property, obviously you don't have to do anything to it and it has an immediate value. One that's already sort of a few years old, maybe you want to do some home improvements to it yourself and try and release some value that way. It's really just personal preference. There's nothing particular, one versus the other. It's for investment really. The one thing that I will say is that if you buy a property, you need to have a mortgage on that before completing. So there isn't as such in Portugal an equity release product like we're used to in the UK and I know in the US. So you have to get your finance before you complete on the property. The only time the banks will really release equity from a property that's already been purchased is to make renovations to that property. So effectively, you'll be investing to the asset you already own.
Thank you. I think this one's for you, Jeffrey, from Daniela. How long does a D8 visa take? Can you be in Portugal while the visa is being processed? And at what stage can you start the process? Is that while purchasing or after completion?
Okay, so depends on which D8 visa. There are two. One is basically a temporary visa, which allows multiple entries over a 12-month period or up to a 12-month period. And the other is actually a D visa like the other visas. So let's just tackle, by the way, if you start on the temporary visa, it's possible, inverted full commas, to convert it to the more traditional like D-type visa. While all that's happening, yes, you can go ahead and purchase your property. Ultimately, as we've said, there's no restrictions, or maybe we didn't, but we should, I suppose, emphasize the fact that there's no restrictions on foreign property ownership in Portugal. Therefore, as a foreign owner, as a non-resident owner coming from another country, you can start that process. Contact Charles, ask him to look for a lovely property for you, and start the whole process of actually purchasing. The D8 visa does have some prerequisites, so in terms of salary, which is approximately just over €3,000 per month, from international salary or consulting income. Therefore, I suppose the technicalities of that you need to discuss either with who's helping you with that at the moment or who will help you with that. But certainly go ahead and start looking for your property, because the fact that you first of all, you've got a multiple entry visa. So if your purpose really is to enjoy that property while you're here, there shouldn't really be a restriction on that in the first 12 months. If then it is really to relocate, then you're paving the way for that to happen and enjoy it as freely as you would like.
Thank you very much. Question from Dennis. Is there a guarantee of completion timings for purchasing a new build or an in-progress property being built?
Who's answering that?
You.
I can take it, Charles. I don't mind.
You take it.
Okay, it depends on guarantees. What you mean by that? You'll have this written into the contract, basically, effectively, what your landmark timings are for phases of construction. Their developers, as Charles and I know, will err on the side of caution quite naturally regarding licensing process. I suppose the good news for them is that there was an introduction of a whole new raft of rules and regulations, which rather than increasing red tape, actually cut through it. It's called the simplex process, which has actually made licensing for new properties significantly easier. Therefore, if you are a buyer looking to, I suppose, to get some sort of guarantees regarding construction being completed, or indeed you getting into your house as at a certain date, look at your contract, make sure that you're sufficiently protected in that contract, or it's going in there eyes wide open, because developers, I think, will right at the beginning seek to be transparent and say, look, in many situations we're at the behest of third-party licensing authorities, and therefore we don't necessarily have full control over when such and such permit or license is going to be granted. But don't be put off by that. I think that certainly there are certain red lines that can be drawn in the contract whereby the buyer's position is protected. Nikki. Yeah.
Can I add something to that? Can I add something to that? Yeah. That it is common that if the developer is wearing rose-tinted spectacles, he will say the building will be completely finished at the end of 2024. And it may be that the building is totally finished at the end of 2024, but that doesn't actually mean that you can move in, because only when it's finished can he apply for the license to the town hall, which previously was a prerequisite of you being able to do the final deed. And that license is not issued by the builder, it's issued by the town hall, subject to all sorts of inspections, etc., etc., etc. The new law that, or the new legislation that Jeffrey mentioned, which is attempting to shorten all those processes, I think he'd be the first to agree that it's not applicable or recommended for all types of purchase. And in a lot of cases, the law now, this simplex that has been brought in, is very good in terms of what it is trying to achieve, but the town councils don't have the armory or the facility to actually conform and do what is in this legislation. So they have to play catch up before this legislation works. Basically the good news is there are attempts, that there is a recognition of the problem. Because one of the most frustrating things, which Judith will tell you, is that when you have a mortgage offer, it has a validity, it expires. And then you get this terrible situation where, but if I don't complete in next month, my mortgage with Judith is no longer valid because it's expiring, and then I have to reapply, and that's more money and all this. And then it gets into a big mess. So, but everybody at the end of the day is driving in the same direction, because the developer, his profit comes from that final payment. So he is as interested as you are in handing over the keys. It's what he wants to do. So, and sometimes you have to be a little bit patient. You have to understand that things work differently here to maybe how they work in your home country, but they're not to work against you. Yeah? Everybody has the same interest. Judith wants to lend her money. Jeffrey wants to be paid his fees. I want to be paid the commission. The developer wants to receive his profit. So we're all trying to move in the same direction. Yeah?
Brilliant, thank you. A question here from Rahul for you, Jeffrey. He has a golden visa along with his family, but the 2-year initial visa expired earlier this year, and there does not seem to be any guidance on renewing it. Have there been any updates from the government regarding renewing existing visas? And when did new visa applications from last year, for example, start getting processed?
Okay, now we're talking about renewals. So I think that, first of all, any visa which has been granted and expired is valid until the end of June of this year. And generally speaking, what we're seeing from the legislation is the fact that, or from the authorities, is that that tends to be extended for a certain period of time to ensure that those people who have valid visas or had valid visas, they will continue to be valid. Look, I think at the end of the day, we have to be honest and say that there have been some delays simply because of the transitioning between two different, I suppose, the extinction of CEF and the creation of IMA as a separate authority which deals with these applications. But we would certainly hope and expect, and certainly pressuring those who can make any decisions and informing them of some of the frustrations which may be present out there, that new visas need to be granted, first of all, on the golden visas, The validation actually for all of the visas or the golden visa applications up to the end of December of 21 has now been completed. And therefore, we would certainly hope to see an increase in the, I suppose, the movement of the process. But for those who have visas already, there is, I understand, a lack of clarity regarding what the renewal process will be, whether that will be an online process or whether it will be required to attend a new biometric appointment. We're preparing our clients to attend biometric appointments, and we just have to wait and see when the appointments become available, I'm afraid. But continue to ask for information from the people who are helping you with this, I would say, to the questionnaire, and you know, things will move as time goes on. But I think, look, the good news is the position of the government is, and authorities is, not to leave those individuals who have had a visa which has expired, you know, unable to use it with a view to gaining free access to Portugal, because legislation should be brought in to extend the validity of that visa. I hope that answers it, Nikki.
Thank you. Obviously, we'll be sharing your contact details at the end, so if there is any further clarity sought, then obviously he can reach out directly. Question from Giovanni. I think this one's probably for you, Matthew. How can you minimise capital gains if you return to the UK after living in Portugal? Is that something you can help with?
Yeah, I mean, look, interestingly, returning, the UK has something called the temporary non-residence rule, which is important to bear in mind, is that if you leave the UK, as an example, and sell a UK business, and then not pay UK capital gains on it, as an example, and then return to the UK within 5 years, you'll be liable for capital gains in the UK and any form of capital gain, including drawing down more than a certain amount from your pensions. So you know, it's a good question there. You need advice. This is something obviously we provide advice on, but be careful by realizing certain gains and then returning to the UK within 5 years. Because the devil is in the detail there as well, okay? And also on the capital gains tax side, it works the other way as well. Before leaving the UK tax net, there's a lot you can do. Looking, you know, at your finances, you can take advantage of unused capital gains tax allowances before leaving the UK. Portugal don't recognise ISAs, so if you move to Portugal and then sell your ISAs, you'll pay capital gains tax in Portugal on the sale of those ISAs. So it works both sides of the fence. And this is obviously something that requires advice, but my advice or my recommendation is to take advice before you leave either jurisdiction, both Portugal or the UK, and move to the other country, to make sure that no stone is unturned in terms of tax planning. You don't want to leave tax on the table after leaving.
Brilliant, thank you. I think this is probably for you, Charles, from Alison. Typically, how long does it take for licenses and consents to come through for alterations to properties such as renovations and swimming pools?
Actually, that's also a sort of impossible question to answer, because it will depend municipality to municipality. But you know, the short answer to the question is that you need to make sure that your architect, who is handling all this process, puts in the planning requests and plans in good order. Yeah, it needs to be professionally done, so that the town hall doesn't have any reason to ask for clarification or to reject what you've asked to do. You will be given a process number the moment that the process starts in the town hall, and you can follow that process through. If you're doing internal alterations to a property, you may not need to ask for permission at all. If you're doing external alterations, you probably will, and if you're trying to amplify the size of your property, you certainly will. If you're doing big works, you may even have to apply for a demolition license which comes before a construction license. However, in the best of all possible worlds, never less than 6 months. Never less than that.
Thank you. Quick question from Norman before we finish up. Wondering if any of us on this call are being represented at a Place in the Sun Expo in London in early May. Is anybody going to be there?
No.
Oh, so Norman, you have to follow up with everybody individually after the
I will
call.
be there. I don't know if we've got a stand, but I'm normally at these shows, Norman. So if you fancy a chat, by all means, drop me an email and we can meet up. And anyone else who's going to be attending the show as well, I'm normally floating around.
And I spend time in London as well, so I can always be available for a coffee.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, it's 7 o'clock, so we've got through as many questions as we possibly could, and there's still some that we didn't quite answer. So sorry about that. Obviously, we will share everybody's contact details, and so my best advice is to reach out to these experts individually for your own questions. But hopefully, that's given everybody a bit of an insight in what's involved with looking to move and buy in Portugal. Really interesting. Thank you to all of you for taking part. It's been fantastic. Thank you for giving up an hour of your evening. And I think that's pretty much it. Is there anything, Jonathan, that I've missed? Obviously, we'll send out the recording to everybody with the contact details. Have I missed anything?
I don't know if everyone just wants to give a last little snippet before they go for the audience, but yes, everything that you said there, Nikki, is absolutely correct. There will be recordings of this circulated, and I think we'd all more than encourage the audience to get in touch with any of us personally. Very difficult to fit into 1 hour the full ins and outs of the property transaction and all the benefits of a beautiful place in Portugal. So yes, I think that's what I would point out. And yes, maybe if everyone just wanted to give a last little taster of their service before we sign off.
Well,
Sounds
I'll just
good.
say that we'd be delighted to see you, whether that be in the Algarve, Lisbon, Comporta, Porto, anywhere in mainland Portugal. We hope that we will be able to help you constructively with your property search, along with the other professionals that you see here this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Charles. Matthew?
Yeah, just sort of to close up, I mentioned before about taking advice before you leave your home country. So if you before leaving the UK, Blevins Franks, we are licensed and regulated both sides of the Brexit divide. So we're licensed, we have a UK office, FCA regulated, and we have our European license as well. So we can advise you before leaving your tax net, and we offer that joined up advice going all the way into Portugal as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matthew. Jeffrey?
Thanks, Nikki. I think, I suppose it's just to say, Edge, we're a full service law firm, 3 offices in Portugal, clients globally, literally globally. So we can assist you with your journey, whether it be relocating, investing in property, setting up a company, or whatever contact you have legally with Portugal. We'd be here to support you, as we have for many clients. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Judith?
Yeah, I think really from my point of view, planning is key. So hopefully people are listening and taking that on board. I can firefight, but I prefer not to. And lending is very much available for international clients. So rates are coming down bit by bit. So everything is going in the right direction.
Brilliant. And last but not least again, Jonathan?
Yes, thank you. Well, I'd certainly point out from an exchange rate point of view, the dollar recently touched a 6-month high against the euro. Buying €500,000 is nearly $40,000 less costly than since the beginning of the year. And pound euro levels are also up at similar highs. They're trading at levels in and around an 18, 19-month high. To get materially higher than where we are now, you have got to go back to 2022. So yeah, from a currency point of view, a very positive time, but a big thank you, Nikki, for hosting and delivering all the questions, and a big thank you to our audience for joining us, and of course our panelists. And yes, just to really encourage anyone to get in touch with any of us personally. So I'd be very happy to have a bit more of a chat, explain it all, and make sure it all goes through smoothly.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, everyone. And it was I'm delighted to host, so hopefully we'll do it again. But thanks everybody for joining, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.